Good morning, everyone. We'll give a few seconds for everyone to get into the call. We appreciate everyone tuning in here to another edition of the Spurs R&D Virtual Lab. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds here. My name is Justin Winter. I'm here with Spurs Sports and Entertainment. For the purposes of this call internally, we always say SS&E, and so I'm going to save a few syllables there and say SS&E. We're excited to have our special guest here today, and Laura Dixon, our Director of External Affairs, will be leading the discussion with our special guests, where we'll be discussing the evolving landscape surrounding the consumption of sports, which is a hot topic today, given where we are in the world and where we are in sports broadcast and content. Since this discussion will be recorded, I'm going to go ahead and timestamp it. It's 10 a.m. Central Standard Time on Friday, June 12th, 2020. If you are a member of the media joining us here today, we want to welcome you. Also remind you that today's conversation will be considered off the record. And before turning things over to Laura, I'd love to introduce you to our special guest that we have here today. We're very excited to have Brandon Gale, our Executive Vice President here at SS&E. He oversees revenue, brand, and communications with us. And Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you've been with us since October 2019.
It is 8 months, literally this week. So, yeah.
And prior to joining us, Brandon spent several years in multiple roles with Facebook. His most recent position, he was a Director of Global Sports Partnerships and Solutions, where he was responsible for helping leagues, teams, athletes, and sports media companies in North America engage and grow fan bases. And so, Brandon, we're very honored to have you here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Also, super excited to have Portia Archer with us here today. Portia is the Chief Operating Officer of the NBA G League. And Portia, so Brandon's been with us since October. Portia, I believe you joined the league in February of this year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So excited to have you here as well. Portia joins the NBA G League from NBC Sports Group. In her current role, she'll be working to increase awareness and revenue at the league and team levels for the G League. With Portia's background, she was Senior Vice President and General Manager of Direct-to-Consumer Services at NBC Sports Group, led strategy, launch, operations, and management of NBC Sports Gold, the network's first direct-to-consumer live streaming business. And so excited to have you guys here. I'll turn it over to Laura here. During the discussion, I'll be monitoring the chat and Q&A functions. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them through the Q&A. I'll pop back on with about 10 to 15 minutes left to go over some of the questions that come through the Q&A function. So Laura, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Justin. You set us up really well, because I think one of the first things that we want to ask you guys about before we get into the technical nuances of broadcast and content distribution is just a little bit more about your career path and what led you to seek careers in this space, and also maybe even talk about how what you imagined these new roles to be have changed in the last few months, given the stoppage of our games and just the whole new impact of coronavirus on sports and consumption of sports. So Portia, I think I'll start with you. Could you give us a little bit of context on what led you to get you where you are today?
Yeah, that's the way you phrased that gave me a little pause, Laura. But, so I have had a kind of winding career of sorts. If I start with coming out of college, I actually started my career in technology. I was a consultant for a firm now called Anderson Consulting. And I was doing consulting all around technology, digital technology services, and helping companies solve problems really that were related to their technology issues and infrastructure. And I also was a software developer. That was a big part of the job, actually coding. So I learned how to code coming out of college, which was really fascinating. And I learned that I wasn't particularly good at it, but it was a good set of skills to build and to enhance my ability to do problem solving. I went back after working a few years to business school and then wanted to kind of shift my career opportunities a bit and move into the media and entertainment industry, and took on a consulting role in media and entertainment that was focused on helping those companies solve all kinds of problems, some related to technology, but most related to sort of content, programming, ad sales, and advertising within the media and entertainment context. And then I played sports my whole life. I played women's basketball in college. I'm a youth coach for girls in basketball. And so I was trying to figure out how to better align my private and personal life with my career, and started looking for opportunities in sports, and spent some time at HBO. They have a small sports division that was particularly focused around boxing, and wanted to move into an organization that was more fully focused on sports. That brought me to NBC Sports Group, and that did allow me to line my life up a bit more with my career. NBC Sports Group doesn't have a lot of basketball. And so I was still sort of looking for ways to build that alignment between my work life and my private life. And this opportunity with the NBA came up, as Justin said, about 4 months ago. I jumped at the opportunity. It seemed like a really exciting opportunity to, again, continue to further align my work and my personal life. I'm wearing my G League hat today, which is something I would be wearing anyway because I'm a fan of the NBA and a fan of the G League and the WNBA. I'm really passionate about the sport of basketball in general. And so this was sort of a great opportunity to kind of marry two areas of my life a bit more tightly.
Well, we are very excited that you made that move over to the league, and about all the things that will come because of your expertise and experience. Brandon, you want to tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, no, it's amazing because I can no longer claim to be the rookie on calls I'm on anymore. So Portia, thank you for taking that distinction. I've always had an interest in sports, much like Portia. I played 3 sports in high school, played football at Harvard for a little bit, and also am a reformed consultant, if you will. So started at Bain straight out of college, and around my 3rd year, really thought I wanted to get into sports. And a woman by the name of Amy Brooks, who is now the head of Teambo, the internal consulting group at the NBA, and the chief innovation officer for the league, happened to just have left Bain and was working in sponsorship at the NBA. So I remember sending a cold email to her from the Bain alumni database saying, hey, I'm thinking about going into sports. I'm not ready to go to business school. And I'll never forget, she wrote me back literally within 2 hours and said, how can I help? And that rolled into me getting a job with the New York Jets and just starting to think about building a career in sports. I ultimately went back to Bain, back to business school, but used that time in business school to really start thinking about what were going to be the emerging areas in sports beyond working at a team or working at a league, and landed on digital media and content. There was clearly a huge opportunity and a lot of explosion and growth around content, and streaming was in its early infancy, in the early 2010s. So ended up getting a job at Groupon on the tech side, focused on sports. That transitioned to a role at Facebook and Instagram, starting working with athletes on their digital presence on our platforms. Instagram was exploding at the time. So a great time to be to help athletes think about building their personal brands, transition into media rights, continue to explode, and leagues like the NFL, NBA are thinking about, okay, we have these rights, we need to reach a younger audience. How do we use platforms like Facebook and Instagram and think about actually putting our live rights on these platforms, as well as the UEFAs of the world, the the Premier Leagues of the world over in Europe. So it was really interesting spending that time at Facebook during this transition. But the thing I always go back to is the business school essay I wrote to get into HBS. One of them was about being the first Black NFL team president. I've always had this idea that I wanted to run a sports team in some capacity. So when this opportunity came up with this organization, with RC Buford stepping into his role as CEO, and given the success that our franchise has been fortunate to have over the last 2 decades, and also where we're going, this felt like the perfect opportunity to make the move from the Bay Area down to Texas and be a part of hopefully the next 2 decades of success that we have here as an organization. So
yeah. That's what we're counting on, Brandon. We're so happy that you're here to guide us through that. So, I mentioned it, and maybe Portia, this is what you were referring to about my question, but this disruption that we've had because of COVID-19, I don't know if that's the part of my question that maybe threw you off a little bit, but the live sports elements that you guys have both been used to, bringing to the world for consumption have been put on hold. There's been this void of live sports. Can you guys talk to us about what's been going on in the broadcast world and the conversations that you're a part of during this void?
Portia, you want to start?
Yeah, sure, Brandon. So I'm 4 months into kind of the other side of the conversation. I'm no longer with a broadcaster, with a network or with a channel in my role at the G League, as you know. But we are talking about how to really engage fans, and we're really focused on what the fan experience can and could look like in this environment where we're sheltering in place and where it's highly unlikely that fans will be included in arenas and stadiums where sports resume or are restarted. So we're really trying to figure out how do we bring fans closer to the game, to the sport, to the athletes that they enjoy. How do we bring their voices if we can't bring them physically there? How do we bring their faces, again, if we can't physically have them there, into the arena and into the fan experience for them and I think for the athletes. There is a lot that's missing when you don't have fans, both from a broadcast perspective and as a viewer, but also as an athlete. Playing in front of fans is an essential part of being an athlete, and they live for that. And that creates moments that you couldn't otherwise create, and creates pressure and intensity and support and enthusiasm and momentum shifts and all of that. And so recreating that is going to be impossible, but we're trying to get as close to recreating it and creating a fan experience that engages fans in many of the same ways. So we're looking at things like what can you do in the tunnel as the players are coming out of the locker room to kind of, again, bring fans closer and provide that hopefully enhanced fan experience to the viewers. We're looking at how we can use audio to bring in music, which is a really important element in a number of NBA and G League arenas, where you have DJs and you have music sort of helping to set the tone and creating a really special and unique fan experience. We're looking at what kind of mic access do you want to be able to give the players, and there's some sensitivities there. But are there ways to use mic access differently or in a creative way to help enhance the fan experience? We're looking at different video angles and how those could be changed or augmented. Virtual reality is something that continues to come up in conversations. How can we use virtual reality or augmented reality in ways that can help enhance the fan experience and bring the fans kind of virtually there, or bring the fans closer. So we're thinking through a number of different options for the fan experience through the broadcast, and also that hopefully provide some energy and juice and sort of a better experience for the athletes as well. Some of the ideas will stick, others of them won't. Some will be around even after we come out of this period that we're in. So it's an exciting time. It's a time to be innovative, a time to be creative. But we're looking at any number of things on the broadcast side for fans.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think
Brandon.
for us, we've had to think about tapping into the history and the archives that we have from a Spurs standpoint. So, obviously 22 straight playoff runs, right? 5 championships. Our partners at Fox Sports Southwest have been great. Literally every playoff victory, every championship clinching game you've been able to watch, right? And relive those experiences. We even held, our first fan event at the AT&T Center last week, Friday, which was, a viewing party for 170 people, socially distanced. Gave us a great opportunity to start testing out some of those protocols, and we do get fans back. But again, tapping into some of that historical emotion around the team and giving people something to, get their minds off of everything that's going on in the world to some respect. But also taking that content and unleashing it on digital, which is not something we had done prior to my arrival. So working very closely with our comms team, our basketball team, our marketing team, to build storylines around this great archival content and roll it out at the right pace to drive that engagement, to doing things like posts on this day, again, to relive all of those moments. I think the other thing too is just thinking about access. So one of the things we did really early on was launch our Austin Spurs Growing Ground series and released it on digital to give folks a good sense of what is it like to be a G League player. And for some of those guys to make the transition back and forth between their G League team and the Spurs team, right? And what's it like playing in Austin, which I think gave people a nice behind the scenes look at that part of our organization, which was something that we had shot, earlier in the season and didn't plan to roll out necessarily during a global pandemic. But I think it was a great opportunity for people, again, to have that access. And, you think about time with RC Buford, for example, watching a championship clinching game that the NBA actually streamed on Facebook and Twitter, and having RC's perspective reliving that moment. So again, the access to voices inside of the organization and the peek behind the curtain, I think, was also key for us, knowing that we weren't going to have live games. And also will help inform, even when we do have live games, how do we take some of those learnings and implement them into what we do going forward?
Yeah, sorry, Laura.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add to Brandon's remarks that the G League, I don't know if people have had a chance to see this news, but the G League is launching a new team this season, what we call a professional pathway team, which is really just giving elite young high school graduates who are 18 an opportunity to start their professional careers. And they'll do that, in this case, with the G League as a part of this new Pro Pathway team that has a number of different elements around it, including a scholarship for the young men who have just graduated and have joined the G League in this capacity. It'll include mentorship and a number of different benefits. But one of the things from a content perspective that it's going to allow the G League to do is to kind of shift its focus. Certainly live games will be a part of that, and we want to continue to have people engage with the G League through that medium. But there's so much about these young men, these youth athletes and G League athletes that you can learn about off the court. There's a lot of, as Brandon talked about, non-live content that fans are actually enjoying, and young fans in particular watch at a very high clip. And so we want to start to engage and continue to attract those audiences, many of whom the young elite athletes bring with them They have followership, they have fans, they're very popular individuals. And so we want to kind of amplify their messages, amplify their brand, and then also grow the kind of relevance and grow the reach of the G League as a result of that, and as a result of them being a part of the G League pathway program, pro pathway program. So that's going to be a shift for us where we're going to prioritize the off the court content. And we don't need to play basketball, although we all want to, and that certainly should be a part of it. But what's happening off the court we'll be able to focus on from a content perspective too. And I think that where we sit now in this sort of global pandemic opened our eyes up to the possibility and the need to do that in an accelerated way. I'm not sure that it would have resonated as well, or that we would have been as motivated to pursue that path without this sort of unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
So thank you, Brandon, for reminding me of that.
Yeah, no, and we talked a lot about 24/7 engagement when I was at Facebook and Instagram, right? And all of the wraparound content of the live experience, that's now become the primary experience, right?
Yes.
And we're going to see how long that lasts, but it's forcing all of us to get creative, which is a good thing, and I think ultimately moves us forward to raise all boats as we think about media rights more broadly.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the G League, I mean, has been driving innovation for our league since its inception, and this is another great example of how the G League is leading the way and innovation for our sport overall. And you know, it will have global impact, like most of the things that start in the G League. Both of you have raised kind of some I guess thoughts that were maybe already in the works, but kind of tied to the question that people have around the value proposition of live sports. I mean, Brandon, you were talking about already, you know, doing things to make sure that content was, you know, top of mind and out, you know, very consistently. And Portia, I mean, you know, constantly innovating is one of the, you know, things that we have to do as a, you know, as a league and an industry to stay relevant. Can you guys talk about, you know, the questions that you get or that you've been considering around the value proposition of live sports, even before the impact of COVID-19 and now after? Brandon, I'll start.
I'll let Brandon. Yes, I was going to say let's switch it up a little.
Yeah, and I mentioned this sort of at the top. You know, we thought a lot about this when I was at Facebook and Instagram, and just we were getting so much inbound from leagues all over the world saying, "Hey, would you consider taking pieces of our live rights?" In part because they wanted to reach a younger audience, but also in part because, you know, ratings from a linear broadcast perspective are getting soft. And you know, Adam talks a lot about this on the NBA side, and you know, we have a rights window that's coming up at the league level. I think the interesting thing with this pandemic is it's demonstrated there is still a very, very strong interest in live sports, right? You take something away for 3 months and you watch the Last Dance series, 6 million people, you know, watching that, tuning in every Sunday, you know, the match with Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, Tom Brady, and Peyton Manning, you know, the viewership for that was insane. So I think this notion that there's a media rights bubble that's coming, I think that's somewhat overstated. That said, I think we still need to prepare for the fact that the audience that would typically sit down and watch a 2+ hour NBA game is not going to be what it used to be. And we're gonna have to look to find people in different places, whether it's on digital and social, whether it's via our mobile app. So we're actually spending a lot of time thinking about the games that we are streaming that you can find on Fox Sports Southwest. How do we enhance that experience in our mobile app, knowing that we're going to reach someone who's probably 18 to 34 much more frequently than we would someone who's, you know, in their 40s or 50s on the mobile app. So that's everything from thinking about, you know, gaming experiences, you know, different camera angles like Portia mentioned, you know, alternate voices and things of that nature. So, you know, the broadcast commentators on linear may be very different than they are in the app. We may have a local Spanish speaker, given that 60+% of our audience here in San Antonio speaks or is of Hispanic descent. So I think those are the type of things we're going to think about. And again, how do we find and meet the audience where they are, as opposed to trying to drive everyone into the linear broadcast? We certainly want to protect that base, and it'll be massively important, and those rights will continue to be valuable. But we have to, again, think about what pieces of those rights do we actually start to carve up and value as well, because those audiences will be there too.
Yeah, I don't have very much to add to what Brandon described. I mean, the value of live rights, many would argue, was what was keeping the cable television bundle and ecosystem together. I mean, it's certainly a reason why consumers stayed with the television bundle, right? They didn't want to lose their sports. And I think having had this hiatus across the sports landscape where fans and viewers didn't have sports has only increased the value and should be a data point in any upcoming conversations that we have with potential distributors or rights partners. So the value, I think, is still there, and you could make an argument that it's even increasingly there, given the pandemic state we're in, and hopefully there'll be some halo and some overhang to that on the other side of it. But you're also seeing it across other content types as you look at subscriptions for Hulu or subscriptions for Amazon Prime or for Netflix continuing to rise during this period of time. So I think, you know, upcoming conversations that the G League is poised to have, and some of those will occur along with the NBA, will be making a strong case for the value of live rights. And it will also be making a case for where that distribution takes place, as Brandon mentioned. It may not be necessarily with the usual suspects packaged in the same way that it's packaged today. It may be with mobile first partners, as well as linear partners, as well as live streaming and digital partners, as well as on our owned and operated channels and platforms. And it may come in different ways, in different forms, and be available in different places. One of the things this question made me think about was the World Cup that we recently enjoyed. And not to pick on any broadcaster, but NBC Sports Group was able to acquire those rights in Spanish, because there was an opportunity there that hadn't been captured by the broadcaster that acquired those rights in English. And so live sports still have tremendous value, and you can kind of cut it up and window it and slice it up in very creative ways. And I think the World Cup is a unique event, but it was an opportunity to have English language and Spanish language and everybody do reasonably well. I think NBC Sports Group definitely came out on the upside of that, but I don't think the rights holder that had English did poorly. So there are lots of potentially opportunities to make the case for the value, and then to leverage that value for
Yeah, and to that point, if you look at what the NFL has done, right, with their Thursday night package, which now lives with Amazon. I think Amazon now also has an exclusive game on the weekend at some point during the season, and they've grown with Amazon. But yes, the NFL they've done a very good job of keeping their core linear business with the rights continuing to accelerate, but also carving out digital pieces, testing with Twitter and Amazon. You've seen Amazon hire Marie Donahue from ESPN, who was doing all of ESPN's rights deals with the big four leagues. And now she's acquiring both original and live rights for Jeff Bezos' group. So I think that's telling, right? When you see traditional folks coming out of linear media, if you will, moving into the digital space to help these platforms start thinking about how do we go after some of these rights. And then the league saying, okay, we recognize there's an opportunity here, right? To serve our audience wherever they may be. So I think that trend will certainly continue. And as you know, the NBA and the G League and the WNBA we have a great opportunity to watch and learn, because in many ways we're at the back end of the sequencing for the rights windows, which sets us up really well to take advantage of all these trends.
So you guys have touched on this, and I think you probably can teach us a lot about the customization of the fans' experience and all the choices that they have for viewing now, right? They don't have to go just to one place. Like when I was growing up, there was one option if you wanted to watch NBA. Then you started to see the bundling, right? And you could get access through cable and bundled ways. But now fans, some of that bundling has been deconstructed, and fans have a lot of choices. Can you guys talk about how League Pass, Twitch, and other options that fans have, and what the tools that are required to produce these kind of hyper custom viewing experiences are different from the traditional broadcast experiences?
I can speak a little bit about Twitch and our experiences with Twitch as the NBA G League. They are a distribution partner of ours. They attract a different audience than what we would attract as the G League on other platforms or mediums or channels. Their experience is very unique. The expectations are different, and what the fans are seeking are different. The watch times on Twitch are different from the watch times that we see on ESPN Plus or some other platform where we're distributed. There are a lot of ways to interact with the game on Twitch. Some people would call them second screen experiences, but in the Twitch environment, it's just the experience. So there are a number of ways to interact with the sport that we think are innovative and different, and that appeal to the fans that are enjoying the sport on that platform. And the G League was sort of the first of the NBA family of leagues to build that relationship with Twitch and make those games available on Twitch Live. I think the G League was one of the first sports brands that Twitch had and made available on its platform as well. So we continue to seek out opportunities to innovate and launch and learn and test and pilot new ways of providing content to our fans and new ways to reach new audiences where they are and where they aggregate. And I think Twitch is a really good example of that. We'll look to do similar things in terms of innovating and looking in new places and reaching new audiences with platforms like TikTok. We haven't quite figured it out yet. We haven't quite kind of cracked the code, but it's an area we're thinking about. We're having discussions. We're trying to figure out what makes sense and when and how. So it's interesting, but it is all kind of in the service of expanding our reach, expanding our audiences, and growing the G League.
Yeah, and I think this point around choice and how much do you give the viewer, right? So I mentioned our app earlier. Imagine a world where if you're really into stats, there's a view you can toggle that literally will tell you the shooting percentage of every player on the court, the odds of a shot going in from a certain place. You can toggle to another view, like I mentioned, where you have a different set of announcers. There's another view where if you are a huge Lonnie Walker fan, you can literally just track Lonnie when he's on the court, right? And see the game through his perspective. I think those types of things, we now have the time to sort of catch our breath and really think about when can we deploy and test some of them in a world where we might not have fans back in our arenas for a period of time, but we're going to have to get creative to make the broadcast more interesting. The other thing I think a lot about is notifications. So the ability to tell someone, hey, Lonnie has scored the Spurs' last 10 points. Tune in now via the mobile app. Or 2 minutes left in the game. It's a 1-point game. We've got the ball, right? So how do you actually drive people into that experience, knowing that we're competing for people's attention? So the thought of, again, getting someone to sit for a full 2 hours, I've got 2 kids under the age of 4 and I work for the Spurs. So the odds of me when I'm at home watching the game continuously all the way through, unlikely. But we've tested notifications and I've said, oh, close game, let me turn the game on. And my wife and I will sit down, right, because we're having a conversation or we're doing something with the boys and actually tune in. So I think those types of features as well will become incredibly important when you start talking about mobile experiences, particularly at the team level and the apps that we have, and how do we create customized experiences, and again, give people those flexible options to view the game they want to do it the way they want to. Because there may be folks who say, I just want the regular game, regular announcers, I'm a purist. You'll have that too.
And Brandon, how does that evolve when you go from, being outside of the arena to inside of the arena?
Yeah, I think when we get in the arena, there's all sorts of interesting things we can do from a geolocation standpoint, whether it's serving you, merchandise offers, right? Even anything about being at home and having the app. One of the things we've talked about is if you're going to watch the 8 games that we're playing in Orlando, can we actually have you order food that we deliver, your favorite, arena food? So again, creating the wraparound experience to the broadcast when you're not here, but when you do come back, how do we make sure the app has all of the things, whether it's highlights, discount offers for concessions and merchandise. I think we've got, again, the time and the bandwidth now to think about some of these experiences, again, that wrap around the traditional linear broadcast or game viewing experience, which is going to be really cool.
Portia, I'm thinking about the international fans, and are there any, unique experiences or differences in the broadcasting of, of our games in the international market space that, may be coming to the United States soon, or any just considerations with the team starting in Mexico that are, going to be different related to broadcast and content distribution?
I don't know if there are any sort of differences that are there that we can expect coming kind of stateside. I think it will be an opportunity for us to test and launch and learn around some things with a little less scrutiny, and allow us to kind of screw things up and before we bring things back to kind of stateside and back to the US. But I think with this new team that I talked about, this ProPath team, we have a set of young men, in one case who is a Filipino native, and the Philippines is an important area. In fact, I'd say Southeast Asia in general is an important area for growth for the NBA. So is Mexico City, or LATAM more broadly. So we're going to be launching teams in Mexico City and this Pro Pathway team with kind of Filipino roots and connectedness to it in the form of Kai Soto and Jalen Green, who's a Filipino American. And so I think that there will be opportunities that we'll pursue with potential broadcasters and potential partners in different parts of the world. I don't think they're new things necessarily that we'll kind of bring back stateside, but I think it does open up some opportunities for us. One of the things that we recently talked about, and again, this isn't new, but it's new for the G League, is around direct to consumer, which was a part of my old role and definitely speaks to a number of the things that Brandon mentioned around personalization and customization, which is kind of becoming the price of admission for a lot of apps. But I think there'll be some things that we might be able to do internationally because our league pass business at the NBA level is managed differently internationally than it is domestically. And so there may be some things and opportunities that we have internationally with respect to D2C, with respect to micro payments with respect to, in some parts of Southeast Asia, they are still on what we think about here as kind of a metered pay environment. So they pay for internet access, they pay for broadband access, kind of like how we used to do for our cell phones. We kind of have to keep paying for minutes. And so it's that kind of infrastructure in a number of countries in Southeast Asia. And so that may open up some opportunities for us to do some things transactionally that we may not be able to do as easily, if at all, here in the US. So we look forward to sort of exploring some of those opportunities in the Philippines, I think, to start, followed by Japan in the coming months.
Brandon, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we think a lot about Mexico in particular, given our proximity. So I've spent time in Mexico City. Obviously, we played a game there last December in Monterrey, and spent time talking to broadcasters who are hungry for NBA content. Now, obviously, at the local level, we don't have the ability to do, traditional broadcast deals, but the NBA is well aware of our interest in Mexico and the opportunities, not just for us to play there going forward, but also think about how do we extend the reach of our content. I know I've asked our digital team to spend more time thinking about what content can we target that is customized for that market. Again, back to this notion of 24/7 engagement, knowing that all of our games may not be shown in Mexico City or Monterrey, and some folks may not have access, but they can still have access to the Spurs brand, and the opportunity for us to do that deeper storytelling on a consistent basis. We know we have 5 million fans in Mexico, and that's without having boots on the ground, investing heavily. So there's really a ton of upside for us to get this right with the content that we have in partnership with the NBA. And I think the G League opportunity is going to be really interesting. So when the Austin Spurs go down to play in Mexico City, that's a place where we'll invest heavy around that experience, both on the ground and from a linear digital content perspective.
That's very exciting. Being so close to Mexico, and having so much crossover in our fan base. It's really exciting for us. So we're, having the G League make that first move into Mexico City is pretty strong and powerful. So Portia, thank you for helping drive that forward, and welcoming Justin back into the conversation, so he can get to questions from the audience. Justin, your audio is a little. No. Try it now.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we got you. There we go.
Sorry about that, guys. Okay. The first question is directed to both Portia and Brandon. It seems that the NBA, among a lot of other leagues around the world, have been leading the conversation and efforts in terms of prevention and safety during these past few months. And within that, the NBA is definitely a world-leading organization in setting the standards of safety in sports. As we look ahead, does this change your perspective on the responsibility and growing reach of live sports and the organizations behind them? I'll start with Portia, probably. I think with the nature of the question, starting with Portia at the NBA level and then going to Brandon from there.
I'm not sure. Does it change my perspective on growing the reach? No, but I'm not sure I understand. I'm not sure I understand the question, Justin.
Rereading it here, looks like just kind of coming out of the situation that we're currently in, and the concerns around the standards of safety in sports. What is our perspective as we prepare to come out of this situation, and what this post-COVID environment will look like? That's my paraphrase of the question.
I do believe that, and I'll use myself as just an anecdotal sample. We don't want to. I think we do no harm is got to be part of our viewpoint, and we don't want to put fans, ourselves, the players, our families in harm's way. So I think that informs the public health environment, and minimizing the risk informs what we're going into now as we as a league and other leagues think about restarting or continuing or having upcoming seasons. For the most part, those are going to be in environments without fans or with a limited number of fans in the arenas and/or stadiums. And so what happens on the other side of that, when we do get to a place where, and public health will dictate this, that we're able to assemble and we're able to increase opportunities to gather in larger numbers, and we can be a part of the fan experience in the arena and in the stadiums, there is some concern that fans may lose interest, right? Like, are we going to be able to get fans back? And just because I look again at my own personal situation, just because New York is beginning to open up, I'm not running around, right? Like, I'm kind of still sheltering in place. I'm not trying to get to a movie theater just because the movie theater happens to be opening up this week or next week. So I think that there'll be some residue of that for fans. You know, people will think, yeah, you know, things look better and the health risks are better, but I don't know if I'm willing to kind of get back into the stadium or get back into these environments. And so there is concern that what's going to happen after this, but I think having the players and the level of competition and the soundness, I guess, of the game intact, there will be interest. And I don't know how long it's going to take for things to kind of bounce back, if you will, but I fully expect that they will bounce back, and it may look different across the country. So what happens in San Antonio may look different than what happens in New York for the Knicks or, you know, for the Nets. But I'm confident that there will be a return. How quickly that will come and when fans will get comfortable on the other side of this is a question. But we'll try to, in the meantime, attract more fans and attract different fans. We have, you know, casual, the core, the curious, the non-fan. We're going to go after all of them. And some of these new viewing experiences that we've talked about and ways to attract and engage fans will help us do that until the kind of public confidence levels are back to where they were before, if not greater.
Yeah, at the team level, I think, you know, we're spending a ton of time thinking about the health, safety, cleanliness of our building, right? So I happen to be sitting in it just because I needed to come in today to do some stuff, but, you know, our office isn't actually open to all of our staff because there's no reason for them to be here. And we have figured out that we can work effectively from home in its organization. And because, you know, our games will be in Orlando, to Portia's point, we're not rushing back into the building. You know, our practice facility opened this week. We were the last NBA team to open, in part because, you know, Brian Wright, our general manager, and the leadership team decided, and Pop, we're not opening the facility and taking testing capabilities away from the city of San Antonio until we know that the city has what they need and the people of this community have what they need testing wise. We don't need to open up and take a bunch of tests off the table, which, you know, I think is about us being good citizens and, again, doing what's right for our community, for our fans first. And I think that trend will continue as we think about how do we bring people back responsibly. You know, I mentioned that watch party we held last week. We were able to start testing some of those protocols around bringing people back, but we had 170 tickets. They sold out within, you know, a matter of days. So the interest is clearly there for people to get back to some semblance of normalcy and have access to sports. And again, that was to watch a re-air of a championship game. It wasn't even a live event, right? We had the Coyote there, and we had our hype squad, and, you know, you could take pictures with the trophies, selfies with your own phone. No one was taking them for you. But again, I think all of these things we have the time to plan for, and I literally have in my email box a 200+ page manual that our building GM has gone out and scoured the world to get best practices on, you know, how do you keep a building of this nature and this size clean to host 18,000 people regularly. So it's something that we're certainly spending a lot of time about. And I know Adam, you know, didn't make a decision to bring the NBA back as the first league. I'm sure he would have liked to, but for him, it was about the data, not the date. right? And making sure that we're tracking with public health information, and we're doing what's best for our fans long term.
Appreciate that, Brandon. And this next question is actually directed specifically to SS&E. And so Brandon, I'll let you take this one. Given the accelerated trend of esports driven by the pandemic, how much consideration is SS&E giving to adding a 2K team to its portfolio, especially given the departure of the Rampage this season?
Yeah, and I'd say esports more broadly is something that we're thinking a lot about. Again, we've got some time to think about what is the evolution of content and distribution and engaging the next generation of fan. We have not yet joined the 2K League. I think for us, it's about thinking through what are all the opportunities that exist in this space, whether it's streaming specifically, and some of these athletes who are building a presence who may not even be on teams. You look at someone like Ninja, right? And the audience he's built as a celebrity in the digital space. So I think we're still doing our homework on where in the ecosystem it makes the most sense for us to play. That could be in the 2K League. It's the most adjacent to what we do as an organization, given that we operate franchises. But it could also be, investing in funds that are, building different parts of the ecosystem around esports. All of those things are on the table, and we just haven't yet decided where it makes sense for us to actually dip our toe in the water.
Thank you for that. And Portia, more of a general league question. Excuse me, looking back 10 to 20 years ago, streaming and watching games on a mobile device may have been considered very unique and potentially not even viable to becoming mainstream, but has since become commonplace. What would you consider a current innovative or emerging content distribution element that may develop in the same way in the next decade or two?
I wish I knew.
Do you have a crystal ball over there? Or?
I don't. It's difficult for me to think about, the next decade. Like, I have no idea. I have no idea. But I can say that there are some changes that we can expect. And I think some of it will be born out of this need and opportunity that we have to think about creative and more innovative ways to bring the fans closer and to enhance the fan viewing experience. And toward that end, one of the things, and I don't know exactly how, and I don't know when, but this idea of data being used to customize experiences and really understanding who the customer is and how we can uniquely create an experience that's for Justin or for Portia, that has the right audio elements, that has the right visual elements, that has the right features and functions, that is curated for me, I think will increasingly become commonplace, such that everyone's going to have kind of their own unique viewing experience. Kind of like when you're in the stadium or when you're in the arena, you're all watching the game, but you all have your kind of unique, custom, personalized perspective and point of view on that. And we're going to be asking, I would imagine, as leagues and rights owners, you as fans for more information. And we're going to be trying to understand more about you. And we're going to be trying to build relationships with you and get closer to you so we can help deliver those customized and personalized experiences, which I think at some point will become commonplace and just expected. And, that's just what we're all going to have to do and have to deliver. But it's going to take some exchange between us and the fans in order to do that. So I think this idea around data, both coming from the fans to leagues in this case, so that we can better understand and then deliver these personalized, customized, and in some cases, data intensive experiences, whether that's around stats or player profiles or something else unique that you come up with that you want to query and understand, is going to be more and more commonplace.
Yeah, I think
Great.
the one thing I'd add there is just virtual reality and augmented reality. And one of the things we thought about early on in this process, and the tech isn't quite ready, but imagine a world where we are sending season ticket members a headset, an Oculus headset, for example. And if you're a front row member, the ability to watch the game as if you were actually in the arena, right? And is that a stopgap to when we can actually get fans back into the arena? I know there are a lot of folks spending time thinking about that opportunity, and can that technology serve as a bridge? And how do we leverage VR in more interesting ways going forward? The NBA's obviously had their partnership with Next VR for a while. What does the next iteration of that look like? And that truly starts to allow you to reach a global audience who may never step foot inside of an NBA arena, but are huge basketball fans, and we can deliver that product to them.
Justin, we have time for one last question.
Sure, and I want to thank everyone for submitting questions. These are great. This one's directed to Brandon, specifically for SSNE. How are you thinking about ticket buyers versus non-buyer fans at this time? For example, producing unique access for season ticket holders during no fan home games, to keeping, helping them feel valued during this time. I know you touched on a little bit of that earlier, but can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's back to the app. So we're thinking about, what are the things that we can put into the app that are gated for season ticket members, because again, we know who you are. We know, what you like to do when you come to the arena. Are there certain pieces of content we can deliver to you as a season ticket member? Are there certain experiences we can deliver you at home, again, when you're watching the game, while we are still not allowed to have you back in the arena? So all of those things are on the table. And then obviously when we come back to the building, we've been spending a lot of time thinking about, how do we give our most valued members, more benefits, more access, both to our players, to our coaching staff. RC Buford has been great as our new CEO in holding town halls with season ticket members, with our top partners. So I think you'll continue to see that access continue. And we love hearing from season ticket members. What do you want us to do? I think, in many ways, we've been an organization that's been, very focused on producing the best team we can, running the business. And those things have created a great experience for fans, but we haven't necessarily had a two-way dialogue. I think that has changed. And we want to hear from our fans. We want to customize that experience and really deliver something that's world-class to match, the success we've had in an organization, is how we operate overall.
Portia, would you like to add anything to that before we wrap up?
No.
Okay. Well, it is 11 o'clock, and you guys just timed this so well. So we want to thank you for sharing your insight, your time with us, and we look forward to sharing this conversation out with many other folks. And thank you for leading us into the future. This is, as you said, Portia, there's no way to predict what's coming, but we've got great leadership in place to lead us through the unpredictable future. And we're just grateful that you two are taking the time to share your leadership with our league and our teams.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, you too.
Take care.
Bye-bye.